Yo, what's up, guys? Today I'm going to talk about identifying patterns within your mind, both positive and negative. As human beings and as habitual beings, meaning that we tend to create these different rhythms and patterns not only within our lives, but within our minds, within our bodies, within the energy that we exert and absorb with other people, and in just about everything else that we do. There is patterns. And I think one of the most powerful tools that we have as conscious YouTube search engine using creatures is the ability to identify these patterns and then determine whether this is serving me or this is hindering me. So, something I'll share with you guys today is something you can use to identify these patterns that coexist within yourselves. And something I've been using a lot myself lately is really observing myself when I'm performing very small tasks because I find it's very simple to see what you're doing within small tasks compared to something that might be very painful to you. When you get fired from a job, or you fail an exam, or you end some type of shitty relationship, this tends to be quite painful, and we tend to kind of look away from things that cause us pain. When perhaps if we dissect them, there is some added value there. Perhaps there was some type of pattern that coexisted before this big problem happened. Something I'll share with you guys today is I eat my food kind of funny. I was watching myself a couple nights ago, and I sat down and I sliced everything up into these little cubes and got all the hard work done, and then I just continued to bounce back and forth between all these different types of foods. And this is kind of what I always do. This is why I love eating buffets, because I have just such a wide variety of food to choose from, and I just go crazy. When I read books, I usually read 6 or 7 books at the same time instead of just focusing on one. This way, I get to read all kinds of different topics and it keeps me engaged in what I'm doing. Other people would call this ADD, the ability to not sit down and solely focus on one thing. I don't think ADD is some type of disease or anything crazy like that. I think that there's a large spectrum at play, and we're all at kind of different places on this spectrum. And I don't know, I can only speak from my own experience, but perhaps if someone was completely over their head, bonkers, hyper, couldn't sit still for a millisecond, that maybe they would need help. I don't know, but what I do know is I would way rather hang out with that dude than I would with someone on the polar opposite side who is just kind of boring and mundane. ADD is going to be another video, which I will post a link down below. But I think what's most important here is that you should live within your mind's natural state of being. Once you understand how your mind naturally works, you tend not to feel guilty and you kind of surrender to the natural habits that you kind of have. When I'm eating my food like I'm 4 years old, or I'm reading a shit ton of different books at the same time, these things just kind of bring me joy. I'm in my natural state. But if I were to say, start a new project every single day in my business and never complete it, I'm not going to get shit done and my business is going to plummet. So there's obviously a balance at play here, and this can be any small task. This doesn't have to be eating food for you. When you mow the lawn, are you mowing it in super straight lines, and are you kind of thinking about the future and how those lines are going to crisscross? Then you're likely some type of strategic thinker. That, or you're just someone who loves their lawn. When you're driving to school or driving to work, are you taking selfies and texting all your friends at every red light because you just have to talk to someone and you just have to connect with people? Or are you just trying to get from A to B without dying? The patterns that exist within the small tasks that we complete are a pretty good example of the overall way that our brain works and operates. And once we understand those, we can kind of take control. So I think there's two extremely important tools for an extremely happy and successful life. And that's number one, to kind of surrender to the moment and be present and not feel guilt about anything. This is kind of a more passive state. And you have to be able to do this along with number two, which is the capability to kind of grab yourself and make yourself solely focus on something. And this is kind of more an aggressive state. There's a great book that's a very quick read called The Myth of Multitasking. I think it took me like 2 hours to read, very short, and it gives multiple examples of just how time consuming it really is to bounce back and forth between activity and activity instead of solely focusing on one thing, getting it done, moving on to the next, getting it done, and moving on to the next. But again, look at it from multiple perspectives. What kind of person you are, what do you enjoy doing? I think that's always the most important question is what do you enjoy doing? Uh, but the key here is obviously balance. And if you can balance between these two things, you're going to be successful in anything that you do. If you like this video, you can click the red button down below. And thanks for listening. Peace.